Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to go over a more wide market crypto update, just because there are several things happening within the next 6 to 7 days, I would say, that do have the potential to fairly sizably impact a lot of the bullish momentum that we have been building up within the crypto market over the past couple of weeks. And so I wanted to go and look at those a little bit further. Also just do kind of a quick overall kind of pulse check on where is the crypto market sitting at? How are things looking? How are things shaping up for the future? There's a lot to go over today. So anyway, let's go on ahead and dive right in. So starting out, we can see on the crypto bubbles, today is definitely overall like a fairly green day. Obviously, we can see ICP doing quite well for itself, Jasmy as well, Solana up a decent chunk. SUI has actually been doing really quite well over the past, really ever since kind of that big dip that we saw several weeks back. So we've got some gaming tokens coming in here. AI doing fairly well also. I mean, there's a kind of a pretty big mix in here. We do see some coins pulling back, but overall I would say this is definitely more like an on average green day than a red day overall. And so, things are looking, I would say, pretty decent overall. So moving on, let's go take a look at some of the charts. So we can see a couple things here. So recently, actually, within the past probably 10, 15 minutes, Bitcoin has actually really started to move to the upside. And so obviously, as we can see, we've been sitting in this downward channel for months now, as we've been over several times. But now, if we zoom in here, there's a couple things I want to look at specifically. So the first thing I want to look at is, as we can see, these are daily candles. So as we can see over the past about 5 or 6 days, we've been kind of running into this point of resistance and getting rejected every single time. Currently, we are obviously above it right now, but we have passed above this a couple different times over the past several days. So I think the main question here will be, can we actually close above this and then potentially, open up a new candle and continue to the upside? As we are seeing, we are actually getting quite close to the top end of this descending channel that we've been in. And as I mentioned before on the channel, I do think it's a possibility that we potentially either get rejected here or maybe go up, bounce into this once more, and then start to come down, maybe retest this in kind of like a flash crash type situation or scenario. I'm not totally married to this idea. I do think it is entirely possible that, maybe we just potentially break out of this descending wedge. I think whenever we break out of this descending wedge is going to be very, very important, and actually is going to push a ton of bullish momentum into Bitcoin. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now. Overall, we are starting to see some slowing down up at this resistance area. We can see RSI is creeping up. It's not technically oversold or overbought yet, but it is definitely creeping up towards the upper end here. So I do think we are starting to see some momentum slow down in Bitcoin, and I think we could see some pullbacks. Again, as I mentioned before, I do think a bottom end of this channel, we got a support here, and we got this liquidity zone. So kind of a confluence of all of these three things. I do think we could see a pullback into this level before we started to bounce off again. As I said, I'm not married to that idea, so I'm open to being wrong about it, but it seems to me that could be a possibility, particularly with a lot of the uncertain events that we have coming up. The U.S. election, we've got inflation data, we've got unemployment data, there's fears potentially of a recession. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and so I think a lot of this could all potentially play into that. I also wanted to take a look at Ethereum real quick as well, just because we have actually seen Ethereum do relatively well over the past couple weeks or so. We are seeing a lot of bullish momentum. We have seen some wicks down, but it is holding momentum pretty well to the upside. We did actually kind of break off of this lower support area and kind of come back off of that, which is really good, because as I mentioned on the channel before, this kind of area, like if we break below the support, I think things get ugly pretty quick for Ethereum. And so obviously, we've bounced off of that, which is good news. I do think, maybe we continue to see it settle on this and maybe consolidate, find some support here, or maybe it continues to keep moving up. We haven't seen the same sort of exhaustion that we kind of saw on the Bitcoin chart, where we've started to see some large wicks to the upside. This has actually held some pretty strong momentum going up, which is good news overall. As you can see, I am doing all of my charting in Margex. I have been trading in here pretty frequently, but not super recently, as I am kind of trying to figure out where the market is going to resolve itself. We are seeing a lot of bullish momentum. However, there is still kind of some wider fears within the crypto market about recessions and rate cuts and the presidential election, all this type of stuff. And so also we will see this later, but there are some liquidation levels indicating that maybe we could see a pullback. And so I'm starting to I'm essentially just kind of waiting to take my trade just because I'm not 100% certain on where things are at. And when you do trade leverage, things can be a little bit risky when you're especially trading very high leverage. So if this is something you're interested in, I do have a link in the description below. Margex does not require KYC or a VPN, so you can just essentially sign up and get started. And also they are doing up to $10,000 in deposit bonuses, as well as a $500,000 CASP airdrop, which actually ends within the next couple of days. So if you want to get in on that, you'll definitely want to hurry to do that. Otherwise, as I always say, leverage trading is fairly risky, so do not do it unless you feel comfortable, just because it is something that, that it's different from normal trading. And so if you're not super aware of that or familiar with how that works, I would say definitely just make sure you get aware before you start trading. So anyway, moving on, we can see here on the RSI heat map, we are actually sitting in the strong with several things closer actually to the overbought territory. This is on the 24-hour chart. If we look to the 1 week chart, we can see that we are actually sitting more towards like the neutral territory, but basically everything 24-hour and down is sitting kind of in the strong, with several things also within the overbought territory. Continuing going down, overbought. Well, actually, this is actually close to neutral, which is good. And then this one's kind of on the upper end of neutral as well. So anyway, that's just something to keep an eye out on. Usually when we start to see a market-wide shift up into the stronger overbought territory, and that does typically mean that we are possibly in for a pullback at some point here in the near future. So that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing I also wanted to look at as well is looking at the 24-hour visual screener. We can see what is happening within derivatives, right? And essentially what's mainly happening in derivatives right now is there's a lot of people entering longs as well as closing shorts, which means there's kind of a very large market sentiment that price is going to continue to go up. As we've seen multiple times on the channel before, this is usually wrong. So this is kind of making me a little bit concerned, and also kind of building my thesis that potentially we could see that pullback in the market coming here pretty soon. We do have a couple catalysts that we're going to get to here shortly in a couple days as to why that could happen. But before we continue on, if you are enjoying the information in this video, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really does help me out a lot. I am trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and so your support does really help me do that. So anyway, if that is something you're interested in, just like and subscribe, and that would be super helpful. Moving on, what I want to talk about is the volume as well, because what we can see basically ever since the beginning of March, we've essentially been on a downtrend in volume. We can see lower highs and lower lows essentially all the way down until we start to see a reversal of this trend and start to see some higher volume come back into the market. I don't think we're going to see any like mega moves to the upside, just because there's not enough eyes or enough attention or enough money flowing around within the market. The other thing I wanted to focus on really quickly, because we're about to move into the liquidation levels, is right up here. What we can see is essentially the 24-hour liquidations as well as long versus short. And so what this means is, again, this is a very dangerous market to trade in, right? As I mentioned previously, the market kind of isn't resolved as to what direction it's going to go. And so you can see it's almost a 50-50 split in terms of who was liquidated, longs versus shorts. This is something that's definitely very interesting, because it basically moves that the price is just chopping around trying to liquidate as many people as possible, which can be very dangerous if you are leverage trading. So again, when there's not a move or when there's not a trade to be made, just don't trade, because this is what happens. You just happen to get liquidated in both directions. And so, that's something that we need to be very careful of. So looking at the liquidation map, we can kind of see something similar on the 1 day, right? I mean, I would say basically all of the leverage that we're seeing is sitting pretty close within where the price is, both to the upside and the downside. Usually we see a little bit of a larger spread here, but basically we can see from 66 all the way up to 69. There's no liquidations to be had here. Same thing on the downside, basically from 60 down to 57.5. Again, no liquidations to be had, which is kind of crazy. That's a little bit uncommon. I don't think I've actually seen that before. And so, of course, there's a lot of people who are essentially trying to time the top or time the bottom, and both are getting liquidated while trying to do so. If we look at the 7 day, this is essentially what we've started to see over the past couple of days, right? There's definitely more of a bias toward liquidating longs, which would indicate a move to the downside. We could see essentially down to 60,000. That's where we start to see a pretty big chunk of liquidations happening. This is about $5.5 billion. If we were to go all the way down to 56, which I think would be pretty unlikely to see, at least in a quick move, that's about $7.6 billion, which is, of course, a decent chunk. And then looking to the 30 day, we're going to see more of the same. definitely very slanted towards a move to the downside where we'd be liquidating longs. So again, I know we haven't seen a lot of bullish momentum within the market, and I don't necessarily want to bet against it quite yet, but based on the data, like it's pretty clear which direction the market's headed, and that's not up, at least currently, right? And so I do think that that's something to just be a little bit careful on. If you are holding stuff for the long term, that's great. Just hold it. Don't leverage trade it, because that can get you in trouble really quickly. If you are trying to trade, maybe wait for the market to resolve itself, just because as we have seen within the past couple of days, there is a lot of kind of chopping up and down. The next thing I want to talk about is actually, there's a couple things I want to go over here. So what we can see, and this is what I was alluding to at the very beginning of the video, we have a lot of things coming in the next couple of days that could have a very outsized impact on crypto. So the first we can see is we've got GDP consumer spending, and then jobless claims. This all comes out on September 26th, which is in 2 days from now. These are very, very heavily going to impact the crypto space, because jobless claims, as we can see, it was 219,000 last month, and now we've got 225,000 forecasted as this month. Obviously, if job claims are lower than that, then that's going to be a good thing, and it will probably send crypto up. And so if we see this coming up higher than what was even forecasted, which was already a bad thing, that means a lot of people are going to get really scared about the possibility of another recession coming, which will definitely scare a lot of people and almost certainly send crypto to the downside. And so I do think that this source of data is actually quite possibly a catalyst that could send crypto to the downside, but we don't know for sure, just because if things overperform, then potentially it could go the other way. Same thing with GDP. We can see that it's actually forecasted almost 3%, where I think this was quarterly. Last quarter we could see it was 1.4%. So obviously we're expecting a pretty large jump here. Again, same type of thing. If we overperform it, really, really good. If we underperform it, pretty bad. So that's kind of an overall sense of the economic data that we have coming out. Also, we can look at the news and tweets here. And one thing that has been picked out specifically is this article that I saw from Cointelegraph. And this is showing that essentially 8.1 billion in Bitcoin options expired this month. This is a lot of money, of course, right? And so what essentially we're trying to figure out here is, do bulls or bears have the upper hand? Now, obviously, as options get closer to expiration, there is a lot more volume, because not only are people trying to impact the price here, but people are also trying to maybe close out their options or secure them or any of this type of stuff as it comes closer to expiration. And so this is something that typically can drive a decent chunk of volume into the crypto markets that we should be aware of. So hopefully the information in this video was useful. If it was, please do give me that like and subscribe. Like I said, it really, really does help me out, especially getting pushed to more people within the YouTube algorithm, which of course does help me grow my channel. I do have that goal to hit 10,000 subscribers, and so I do know it's going to be a very, very tall task, but I think hopefully with your help that will be achievable. Also, if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, please do just feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section below. I do read and respond to all of them, or at least I do try my best to. So if you have anything that you want to talk about or say or anything, please do leave me a comment. I do really appreciate all of your guys' thoughts, and I look forward to interacting with all of you. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.